Welcome to the Ben and Lauren Show. I'm Ben, and this is Lauren, and here we are, Sunday night. We tried doing a Saturday night podcast, but we had some audio issues, and we had a bunch of Daniel interruptions. Like to the point where we just said, okay, we give up.
Yeah, he's been doing this thing since we put him in his new bed where he'll get up once. And then you'll put him back in bed, and he'll seem like he's asleep, but he'll keep getting up every 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Usually he does that at 2 in the morning, and yesterday he did it at 11:30 or midnight instead.
Right when we were doing the Ben and Lauren Show.
So we finally said, look, we got to get Daniel back to bed. And by the time we got him back to bed, we were too tired to keep going.
So here we are, Sunday night. It's a day late, but here we are. So we have one extra day to add to our what did we do this week?
Unless we want to keep it, well, might as well talk about it.
What did we do this week, plus today? Well, the big news this week is that the results from the trial, the trial's over that I almost was a juror on.
And you got really interested in it.
And I became very interested in the case, even to the point where I was going to go attend and watch the case in person, but Tuesday stuff came up and I wasn't able to do it. But I did read yesterday what the verdict of the case was, and he was acquitted. That means that basically the jury went in 5-10 minutes, came right out with a not guilty.
Yeah, it was apparently 27 minutes from them being dismissed to deliberate to announcing their verdict, and I'm pretty sure they have to allow for 10 or 15 minutes for everyone to come back to the courtroom after they say they've had a verdict, so they can only have deliberated for 15 minutes or so.
So the short version of the case is that there was a custody battle between this man and his girlfriend. The girlfriend gained custody of the child. The child had medical issues. The child died under the care of the mother. Meanwhile, the father was working with the court system to try to gain custody before he died. And when his child died, he went on social media and said, I'm going to start digging up the corruption in this court. And he was basically arrested with no charge, but then he was released with a restraining order, but he continued posting. So he was arrested again with a, was it $500,000 bond?
Well, it started off $1,000.
It was a $1,000 bond, and as he started raising up money to get the bond, it went up to $500,000. And then I think he was in jail for a while.
A couple months. I think they arrested him in July.
So he's in jail a couple months. And then finally his jury date comes up. It's a misdemeanor, and I was on the jury. Had no idea what the trial was about. But as it progressed, and I found out more from the media, more information on the case, and found out the circumstances of what he was doing. And clearly he was expressing his free speech of he was threatening the court system, exposing dirt on that.
Yeah, he was basically saying that the court system is corrupt, and that's why they didn't care that the child's mother was not treating him properly. They just assigned what they felt they could,
right?
With no regard for what might actually happen to him.
But exposing corruption in a court is not malicious use of telecommunications.
Right, and the judge in the case claimed she was uncomfortable and considered that he was making death threats.
Right.
Because he put a picture of himself with a shovel over his shoulder saying, "You'd best believe I'm going to keep digging, and I'm going to dig up the skeletons in this court's closet so nobody else's kids get hurt the way mine were."
Pretty much.
The way mine was.
So she looked at that and said, "Oh, I feel threatened. He's going to kill me and bury me with a shovel."
Which my brother thinks was a reasonable thing for her to think.
Well, your brother told a story tonight that I think was different circumstances than this story, where he felt threatened. He told me the story because of feeling threatened. And I was kind of saying, well, how people feel threatened all the time. How can you convict a person based on someone else's feelings? And he told the story basically, I won't go into it, but it was basically, he said he can sympathize with the feeling threatened. I just don't know if the picture of somebody clearly threatening the court system as a personal threat.
It is not a death threat.
To your own self.
Although my brother also said that he saw multiple other postings the man had made in other situations and felt that actually those were a lot more threatening than the one with the shovel.
I'll tell you, he probably is going to think a lot more carefully when he posts things.
Well, he probably should, because the truth is, the fault of the child's death was really not the court system.
Right. There is a concept that I've been reviewing in my mind a lot lately. It's the famous golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto yourself.
Right.
And if you're going to expose corruption, you have to do it in a manner that exposes corruption. And yes, that's going to make people feel uncomfortable. It will. If you're part of that system,
Right.
and the system is accused, everyone in the system is going to feel uncomfortable. But if that needs to be done, that needs to be done.
Well, I think people get into their head that they're going to be a hero. They're
Yeah.
going to charge in. It's going to be them against the man, and they're going to win. And I've been encountering this a lot with people that I'm friends with on Facebook recently.
Crusaders.
And everybody wants to feel like they're going to make a difference. They're going to change things that they see as unjust or unwise or taking away our freedom.
Change the world.
They're going to do something about it, and they're going to talk about it, and they're going to put it out on social media. Meanwhile, I'm looking and saying, you have small children, and you're dealing with a social media that often has an agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And the agenda is not friendly to you, and you are putting yourself at its mercy. I think you should be careful with discussing decisions that you're making about your family so publicly on Facebook. And in the past couple of weeks, I've been called a coward twice. Because I've said that, remember, your primary responsibility is to take care of your children and keep your children safe. So while you want to do these protests and you want to talk about it on social media, keep in mind that the monster you're attacking does have the ability to fight back, and your children are directly in the line of fire.
Well, think of it this way. Provoking a tiger, not choosing to not provoke a tiger, is not a cowardly act.
Well, a lot of people have told me that they've given me a lot of the same language. Well, if you don't use your rights, you lose them. Well, if we don't stand up for freedom, then, it'll get taken away. And I keep getting that poem quoted at me about, the one that was quoted about Nazi Germany.
First they came after,
for the Catholics, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Catholic, and
so on and so forth.
So on and so forth. And the truth is that I think you, as this man did, have absolutely a right to protest. And you absolutely should.
He also has nothing to lose. Oh, he has something to
He
lose.
has something to lose.
But he already lost his son.
He already lost his son in this case. He had nobody in the line of fire.
Mm-hmm.
But for many people, if you're going to protest, say, a store's anti-open carry policy, and you want to carry your legally purchased and owned firearm into the store,
because that's your right.
Because that's your right, even though the store has expressed that they do not want customers carrying there, and you do this with your small children, you are asking for a lot of trouble for you and the small children, because that is the society we live in, and that's the way people act.
Well, putting yourself in other people's shoes, it's not always easy to do. Because obviously there's this world that we live in, and we're always discerning between the darkness and the light and the good and the evil.
Right.
And it's so easy to characterize people who are part of a system that perhaps is partially corrupt, or portions of it are corrupt. But does that mean every individual involved is corrupt?
No, but you really have no way of knowing who is or is not until you have experience with them. And I thought, this man on social media, for instance, he had no business being put in court in handcuffs with prisoner across his back. However, did he act wisely? No. If you're going to go up against a court system and you're going to start digging into its secrets, posting about it on Facebook is just stupid.
I think James O'Keefe got a better method going.
Yeah, and
James O'Keefe,
a method quiet.
He basically says, get a mic. Go in.
Collects everything.
Collect the data
first.
You collect the data first, and you don't boast about it ahead of time. You do it quietly. You do it methodically, and you do not do it in a threatening manner. You do it in an efficient manner. And as you gather up that information, then you can actually expose the corruption.
Right.
But trying to embarrass people or intimidate people in the process,
or to think that you have some special standing that if you go on crusade, nobody can touch you.
right?
because I'm exercising my rights, and since I have those rights, they'll all be kept. And if something happens to me, then I'll be a martyr for the cause. Well, okay, but you probably should consider who in your life is going to get caught in the crossfire, and you should plan wisely.
Yeah.
You're going to protest. Plan wisely.
Well, look at David and Goliath. Goliath's method was to taunt and to taunt and to threaten and to threaten. David never threatened.
He stated fact.
He just stated fact. He says, you're blaspheming the God of the universe, so I have nothing to fear from you.
I don't have to be concerned about you.
And he defeated him handily.
Right.
And he didn't boast about it. He didn't taunt it. He didn't make a big fuss about it. He just took care of it.
So I guess my thought with the man in this trial and with the other people I've been talking to, like I said, I think all of us have the tendency to want to be the crusader who succeeds in uncovering the great evil.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there is a lot of strings attached and a lot of cost to count while you're doing that. And you should be very careful to be aware of what exactly you're doing. It's like the thing that, was it Jesus advised to be wary as serpents?
Wise as serpents.
Wise as serpents and harmless as
harmless
doves.
as doves. Yep.
And I think right now people's emotions are running high on a lot of different levels. And
well, they looked at those posts that he put on there, and they do not look harmless as doves. They look dangerous like a serpent.
they don't look wise either.
Yeah, they don't look wise, and they look dangerous.
If you assess what he actually said, the man was not wise in what he did.
Right. He was not wrong in what he said.
But it is good that he was found not guilty.
Absolutely.
Because the truth is, he should never have been in jail in the first place.
Right. And had I been on that jury,
you would have been there for 10 minutes deliberating. And
yep, I would have been in that room, and it would have been not guilty.
What was it you said? You were relieved because you feel like the injustice was averted, but you didn't need to be there to make it happen. See, you wanted to be a crusader too.
A little bit. Well, I had this fear in the back of my mind that that particular jury would get very technical and say, technically, according to these A, B, C, D, E, F, then we have to rule this way. And that's a little bit of what I was talking with Aaron about, was that he has to make judgments based on certain criteria, and he doesn't have the ability to grant favors.
Right.
He doesn't have the ability to just say, I kind of like you, and I think you ought to have that pool, so granted.
Well, my brother sits on a zoning board of appeals, so they hear people who want to use their property in ways the property isn't zoned for, and people have to prove that they have an undue burden on their land, right. So they can't really use it for something useful, and they need a zoning variance. But
it's usually people who want an exception to the rule, just because.
And it's not really necessarily a hardship in most cases. It's, I want to put my air conditioning on this side of the property instead of that side of the property, and it's too close to my neighbor's house according to the zoning, so I want the zoning changed so I can put my air conditioning unit where I want it to be.
So you're not going to go there and just be granted favor.
Right.
You're not just going to, dress nice, smile really big, and, they'll help you out. That's not their job. Their job is to look at, why are you here? Is there really a good reason for you to be here? And if there is, make your case, and we'll make a ruling. But people don't have that in mind.
No, they want their property to be an exception so that they can do what they would like to do.
And I can sympathize with that. Absolutely. Because we want to be able to just do what we want to do with our property, and
we'd
not
like to raise chickens.
Yeah, but in suburban settings, you don't have that luxury.
Yeah, the closer people live to each other, the more they get on each other's nerves, and the more that they regulate each other so that they don't get on each other's nerves.
Yeah.
Anyway,
our cells are so close together. Anyway,
that's not a cell. We chose to live here. We could live somewhere else.
We could, but we choose not to right now.
Right.
So that was kind of a combination of the case and conversation I had with Aaron, and
stuff that I've been talking with people about.
And stuff you've been talking. And actually, the conversation was good because Aaron gave me a little bit of a perspective on the other side. He works in the system, so to speak, and people sometimes get angry at the system and want to take it out on the individuals in the system, which is unfair to them. So that was one thing.
That's the culmination of a lot of conversations of this week.
It is.
You ended up being out of the house a lot this week.
Yeah, I've been gone a lot this week, which is unusual.
I ended up doing a lot of stuff with the kids by myself.
I'm usually home all week long. And I was gone, 3 days practically?
I went and did the Walmart shopping without you.
Mm-hmm.
We don't actually go out to stores beside the grocery store all that often. But we had stuff we need to get ready for the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And as it got later and later in the week, I really need it available for this next week coming up so I can get it done. And I realized we weren't going to be able to go together.
Mm-hmm.
So I took the kids on Thursday, and I did shopping with them. And then I ended up having to go to farmer's market without you because you were still gone.
Right. Which is also unusual, going to farmer's market.
That was a long day.
I bet. I can't imagine going to farmer's market with all the children by myself.
Well, I think normally I would probably have less of a trouble with it. It's the being 36 and a half weeks pregnant that was the real icing on the cake.
4 children and number 5.
Well, and number 5 makes me kind of slow and not able to take things that I normally
She
would.
bought a little shopping cart, which I think made it a lot easier.
For farmer's market. We've been meaning to do that all summer.
We had an opportunity.
We have one more market before fall time.
We had one opportunity at Aldi, and I didn't get it at the time. So
oh, well.
I'm guessing the one you did get was probably better.
Well, I'm not sure if it was better.
I'd like to think it's better.
Okay, well, we'll decide that it's better.
So I had a big event on Friday. I went fishing with my dad, got up real early in the morning, drove about an hour out, hopped on the boat right away, 7 a.m., about 7:15. And went 20 minutes out into the water and just started fishing for perch out on Lake Erie. And it was a good time. Got to watch the sun rising. Saw a lot of seagulls. Didn't really catch a lot of fish, although throughout the day, 4 fishermen caught 64 fish.
Which only translates to about 13 pounds of fish.
Yeah. And after you fillet them and everything, one of the fishermen shared his bounty. So they split it 3 ways. Yeah, 3 ways. So we got a third, and Mom and Dad got a third, and the other fisherman got a third. It was about 2 pounds, 2.5 pounds each. Not very much.
Well,
enough for a good fish fry and a good lunch. But Lake Erie is really beautiful. It's a beautiful lake.
Is Ohio on one side and Michigan on one side, and is it Ontario?
Yep, Canada.
Canada on one side.
So you have Canada, Michigan, Ohio.
It's the lakes on this side of Michigan are kind of they're very different in character from the lakes on the west side of Michigan, where if you were fishing over there, you'd be looking for salmon.
Mm-hmm.
So big old fish, and the lakes are deeper over there, and they're a lot bluer. They're prettier looking. On this side, they're rocky and
you know that saying, the lakes are always bluer on the other side of the state.
I'd never heard that saying before. So Lake Erie, where Ben was, is a lot in character like Lake Huron.
Now, Lake Erie used to be a very polluted lake, but it's been cleaned up.
Which is probably good because we were just eating fish out of it. Yeah, there used to be a lot of mercury in the lake, wasn't there? People would get mercury poisoning from eating fish out of the lake.
All sorts of problems.
Yeah, it's a lot better now. It's clearer, and the fish are healthier. And
we actually caught quite a few walleye, little baby walleye.
Now, what was the situation with the perch? You said that the perch fishing is way down. People used to come in with 50 pounds of perch apiece.
We don't know exactly, but we were talking to the guy who cleaned all the fish, and he said that fishermen used to come in with 40 to 50, even 60 pounds per fisherman. So that means that our catch should have been closer to 150, 200 pounds of fish.
I can't imagine where you'd put all the...
That's a lot of
fish to take care of.
That's a lot of perch.
And the ones that you caught were what? About this big?
They ranged. Some are real small, some are big. And but they all had nice little morsels of meat on them. So.
Well, they tasted good. Our kids basically inhaled them.
Now, perch fishing is fun because you have minnows and hooks, just like normal fishing, and a big heavy weight on it. So you just let it down. You don't even have to cast it. Just let it down right by the boat. And once it hits the bottom, you can tell because it goes slack. Just go a little bit above and let it sit. And the rocking of the boat, you can see it go slack and go taut and slack. And all you do is wait for it to go shaking. And then you set the hook, reel it in, and get it into the boat. Now, the problem is I didn't know all that, so I'd see it shaking, and they're like, oh, I got a fish.
You tried to reel it in?
Well, I tried reeling it in without setting the hook, and I wouldn't keep the rod tip up. So reeling it down like this. Practice. Yeah. So I did it wrong. I lost a couple fish that way. So now I know. I set the hook, rod tip up, reel fast, get it in the boat.
I know we were fishing in Pennsylvania, was it 2 years ago now? Mm-hmm. Yeah, your dad kept telling me you have to set the hook before you reel the fish in. So I did that. Mm-hmm. But
I had the only double. We have a hook on higher up and a hook at the bottom, and so sometimes you'll actually catch two fish at once. It's kind of neat.
Well, so that was your day Friday. We expected him to be back kind of at lunchtime, but he didn't really get back till 5:30 because I guess one of the boat engines didn't start when they were out in the middle of the water. So it was a 20-minute ride out, but it was an hour ride back.
And I was counting on more time to get things wrapped up before Sabbath. So it was a very busy several hours when I got home. Delayed dinner a little bit.
Well, yeah, because I was waiting for the fish.
So.
Because originally we were expecting you home. Even when you came back to shore, you were thinking maybe 4 o'clock or 4:30, which is plenty of time to get home. And
right. We started going into shore around 3:30. No.
It was earlier. It was 2.
Was it 2?
Yeah, you said somewhere around 2 o'clock you were heading back to shore.
We didn't get back to shore till 3:30, 4 o'clock.
Right. So that's why I figured there'd be no problem having fish for dinner.
And then it was an hour and a half drive back because of rush hour.
Thank you for running.
So yeah, one of the exciting things is one of the two engines on the boat didn't start up, so we only had one engine going back. So it took almost an hour to get back to shore. It took a long time.
Well,
but here I am.
It was a good day.
It was a great day.
You went with your dad and a friend and your uncle.
Saturday was very restful. We didn't really do much of anything.
Bible study was not this week. So last week we didn't go to Bible study because we had colds. This week we didn't go to Bible study because they weren't meeting, but it was very nice to be restful. We basically sat on the front porch a lot. Mm-hmm. We got all the way through our Torah portions on Friday night without me falling asleep because
that's an accomplishment.
Well, because we came up with the answer to a riddle. Maybe we can talk about that in a minute with the Torah portions.
Sure. So the Torah portion,
I meant maybe we could finish up the week and then talk about Torah portions.
Well, that Saturday, that was the week. Today,
we went to the Chesterfield.
We went to the Chesterfield Historical.
Chesterfield is a town that is
village.
It's a township that's 2 township over from where we live in Clinton. Then there's Macomb, and then there's Chesterfield as you're heading north.
So it was very interesting. I like that they have a lot of local history recorded there. So there was a gentleman there selling books who spent a lot of time researching local history in this particular area. And we just were striking up conversations, and he started talking about lost cities. Like, lost cities? He's like, yeah. Have you ever heard of Belvedere? Well, I've never heard of Belvedere before. It's like, well, you know, where do you live? I said, I live in Clinton Township. Oh, it's right there by you, right by Metro Beach, right by where the Clinton River comes in. So he starts talking about this village called Belvedere.
It was more than a village. It was planned to be a big city. It was supposed to rival Detroit. It
was supposed to be a very big city, right at the entrance of the mouth of the Clinton River.
It was, as our friend Zach Bauer likes to say, though,
vaporware.
Yeah. It was all on paper. It was going to be this big, beautiful city.
Yeah.
It was going to be a port in the harbor on the Great Lakes to rival none. It was going to have canals coming off it. It was just going to be this grand, big project. But there was a problem.
Well, if you look at it now, basically it's just a bunch of housings, houses and...
We've been down there. I didn't realize that's what it was. But it's a neighborhood that leads basically right out into the water, which is a little weird. Mm-hmm. But the reason is that the lake levels rose about 6 feet from where they were when they built the city.
And basically flooded it.
And
the lake just engulfed it.
There's a legend that there was an old Indian man who lived in the area. When he saw them building the city there, he said, that won't last. The lake level rises every 35 years.
Basically, that's going to be underwater in about 20 years or so.
It was faster than he predicted.
It was underwater after 5 years.
But what's been interesting is the lake levels have dropped here over the past several years to way, low levels, and everyone made a big fuss about global warming and how our lakes were going away.
You know, if Lake St. Clair continues to drop, what if that city becomes revealed?
Well, here's the thing. Over the last 2 years, the lake levels have shot back up.
Yeah.
And, you know, when my mom was a kid, they used to do field trips out to fill sandbags to try to stop the lake from taking over people's houses. So this rising and lowering of the lake level is apparently a cyclical thing.
Now, in the west side of Michigan, there's all sorts of sandbags all over the place. And you can see the overpasses that go over the rivers, and there's only a few feet from the water to where the bridge is.
So lake levels around Michigan are very, very high. In spite of us shipping off a lot of our water to the western states, apparently it's normal for lake levels to be very low and then to be very high. And Belvedere, the town by us, was built during a low spell, and they didn't pay attention to the cyclical nature of the lake, and the lake rose and it swallowed up their town.
Basically, they should have built it further away from shore on higher ground.
But they wanted the lakefront property because that's what's so valuable. But here's the problem with the lakefront property. The lake rises.
Right.
And then it sinks. And then so your lakefront property suddenly has a beach that lasts out 80 feet before it gets to the water. So and then you build your houses closer to the water, and then the lake levels rise, and all of a sudden all the houses are flooded. And
well, I think it would be great doing like scuba diving or maybe like trying to find the lost village. I mean, just there's probably remnants or something under there.
From what I read, it mostly consisted of empty lots.
Wow.
At the time the lake rose, so you have a bunch of people whose cellars are probably still there, but they were cabins.
So there's all sorts of history that could have been totally different.
The guy who founded Belvedere bought his first cabin for $35 on that land.
That's just amazing.
So this is all stuff we learned by going to the Chesterfield Heritage Days.
Well, I learned all this, and then right before the podcast, we looked up an article that had all sorts of information about Belvedere, because we wanted to know where exactly it was and learn more about the history.
We actually know where it is. We didn't know that we knew where it was,
so
but we do.
We didn't gather all this information from the conversation with that guy, but he did email me. I sent him an email, and he emailed me back a map of where it's located. He also sent me an advertisement for the liver pills that the guy sold.
The guy who founded the city basically made his income by selling, liver pills that were supposed to keep your insides healthy. Apparently they were in high demand during cholera epidemics. Yep.
He also sent a picture of a banknote from Clinton Township that was local to here, which is kind of neat.
I guess it's a little strange where you live in a place and you live here your whole life, and I've lived pretty much in this area my whole life, and there's a whole history to it that we never learn about and it's never taught, because it's really not the history of the United States. It's not the big overarching history that we all are kind of taught. This is very personal, very local, right on the land where you live.
Mm-hmm.
There is history there, and you don't know anything of it. And then all of a sudden one day you find out, whoa, all this happened right down the road? Oh, I know where that was.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why that road drives off into the lake.
Yeah. Well, there's a book that my mom got that describes the names of all the roads around here and the history behind the names, the people behind the names, families and things like that. And it's fascinating because we
know all those roads.
We know all those
them
roads
all the time.
And
so that's who Mr. Gratiot was.
Yeah. Like there's this one road called Heidenreich.
That's a name a lot of people mispronounce.
They call it Hidden Rock?
No, it's Heidenreich, but most people mispronounce it as Heinrich.
It looks like Heinrich, but it's Heidenreich.
It's Heidenreich.
It's a good German name, but there's a whole family, a whole history behind that name. I don't know it, but...
We live on a piece of property that belonged to a very wealthy widow named Mrs. Nunnally, and everybody in the area knew Mrs. Nunnally because she was a huge landholder.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very rare at the time for a woman to be a landholder, let alone a widow.
Yep.
So, we take our
It was a dairy farm, wasn't it?
Was it no, I think it was an actual farm, yeah. It would be interesting to look up more about that. And then the Shook brothers lived across the street. And they apparently, according to this Lost Cities thing, tried to found a village called New Liverpool, and it just bombed out. They weren't able to succeed. But
city builders.
We drive on Shook Road all the time. We drive on Nunnally. We live on Mrs. Nunnally's property.
Yeah, the street right by us is called South Nunnally.
Do we know anything about her?
No.
No.
Nothing.
We really should learn, though, and that's the kind of stuff.
And what
we should be
happened to her
teaching.
sons, or if she had any sons?
I don't think she had any children. That was the other unusual thing about her. But I'm not positive about that.
So who knows about Mrs. Nunnally?
So Ben's mom has been wanting us to go to the Chesterfield Heritage Days for several months. She's made a point of keep telling us when it is, and she wants to go. And my feeling was it's kind of a little boring to go.
I always have a good time.
Well, it doesn't necessarily excite me to go, but I knew she really wanted to go, and the kids enjoy going, so it's like, let's go. And it was a very pleasant day. There weren't a lot of people there, and I think Mom was disappointed because she was hoping there was going to be a lot more activities, but we actually really enjoyed the day.
Yeah, I had fun.
I was noticing our kids, this summer really has been interesting to watch them. They have become, it's like they've woken up in a way. They are very bright and interested. And I don't mean bright as in they're super, super intelligent. It's just there's a brightness about them when they're looking at things and just poking their noses into little corners and finding out about stuff. And they are very easily entertained.
And they're finding ways to entertain themselves.
They had a blast. They had a scavenger hunt that they did where somebody had taken pictures of a bunch of stuff at this historical village.
They loved it.
You had to go around and find all the things, like where's this old stove and where's this big wheel.
And it was all based on pictures.
Right.
You know?
They had to look at pictures. They didn't have to read anything.
And they got candy as a reward.
And it was interesting to hear Susanna describe it. Did you hear how she described it?
No.
The scavenger hunt paper is like the money, and we have to turn in the scavenger hunt paper to pay for our candy.
Well, that's interesting.
That was her review.
I didn't catch that.
So
it becomes like money.
Yeah, she is absorbing what it means to have fiat money. Basically,
you're right. It is fiat money.
As long as you have something that the person at the other end is willing to trade you for it, this is like your money.
It's also just declared to have value.
Yes.
So it has value by fiat.
Yes. But it was interesting to hear her describe that. And I found it really interesting to watch our kids today, because we've gone to this several times. And they have just changed, and as one of them changes, it's like they all change together.
Well, watching Daniel especially. Daniel, just a year ago, he would have just sat in his stroller, just not...
At the beginning of the summer, he would have just sat in the stroller. But
he wanted to get out, walk around. He'd walk around with his hands behind his back, just kind of wandering around.
He walks around like an old man.
Soaking it all in.
He's very serious.
Yeah.
He kind of walks with his chest out and his hands behind his back and his chin kind of tucked in and looks at everything very seriously. He's pretty funny.
He'd point at things and comment about things. And I think one of the highlights is they had some games. They had the needle in a haystack game, and Daniel did a game where they dropped clothing pins into a mason jar.
He and Susanna had so much fun with that game. I think I might have to get out clothespins and let them play drop the clothespin in the jar.
Yeah,
it's a very simple game.
And they had a fishing game with magnets. You get the little paper fish.
But their favorite thing was somebody had gotten out some old farm equipment, a grinder and a corn shucker.
The corn shucker's fun. You put the dried corn in it and you just turn it, and it plucks all the little corn.
It's got all these little teeth that runs it over these little teeth, and all the corn drops into a bin. And
then you can just scoop that corn out, put it in the grinder, and grind it up, and you get that real fine, corn powder.
Well, it wasn't that fine. The kids wanted to actually use it. They were suggesting at the village, just go home and use this as bird food. No. My kids are like, that'll be cornbread.
Yeah. I think we're going to make cornbread out of it.
Well, we came home, and Abigail and Susanna painstakingly sifted it all so that we would have enough actual cornmeal to make cornbread.
So we can take the other part and grind it up finer.
The other it's way too coarse to make cornbread. So that was our day today. Was
and they had a blast. I think they really.
Then we came home and they harvested all the carrots for me.
Yeah.
Got a giant bowl of carrots.
Mm-hmm. And I cleaned the garage.
Yes.
That was a big task for me.
So tomorrow I have to preserve turnips and carrots, our root vegetables.
And I'm going to work on Mom's computer tomorrow. She has finally decided she wants to get the computer set up, the new one.
Mom has a new laptop, and I think she's been dreading turning it on for a couple weeks.
So tomorrow's the big day. I'm going to get the new laptop set up.
See, this is the difference between Saturday and Sunday. On Sunday, we've started our new week, and we're already like, yep, this is what we're doing this week.
Mm-hmm.
Saturday is like, I wonder what we did last week.
You're right. Sunday is all about, all right, what are we doing this week?
What are our projects? What are we up to? So we're at 34 minutes. Do you want to quickly talk about our little riddle that we think we solved?
Yeah, we read the Torah portion on Friday night, the whole thing, and
I planned carefully so I could stay awake through it.
it was the chapter talking about the blessings and the curses, and we very carefully read through all the blessings and the curses. But before then, it describes the festival of first fruits, and it gives kind of a rote speech that
Kind of a liturgy.
that the people are supposed to recite when they're making their tithe. And one of the things that caught our attention is it starts off, part of it starts off with, my father was a wandering Aramean. And for the longest time, I've always been taught or have heard or understood
It's referring to Abraham.
that this is Abraham. My father, our father, as soon as you say father, it just clicks that that's Abraham. And we started thinking, is Abraham an Aramean?
Do you have that available, that passage?
I'd have to look it up.
Well, we've heard people speculate before. Why is he called an Aramean? Because we know that Abraham kind of was a wanderer. I mean, he lived in tents his whole life after he left his home. But then we realized that in this little liturgy that a person is supposed to recite as they're laying their first fruits from their land in front of the Lord, it begins with, my father was a wandering Aramean, and then it tells a life story of this man who is their father. And
So this is Deuteronomy. I see it. Deuteronomy 26, and it is verse 5. And you shall make response before the Lord your God, quote, a wandering Aramean was my father. So if you just take it there, it's like, okay, that must be Abraham. But then read on. And he went down into Egypt and sojourned there, few in number. And there he became a nation, great, mighty, and populous.
and
That's
then,
not Abraham.
then the Egyptians treated us harshly. So the next step in this is that
Right.
the Egyptians have treated us harshly and made slaves of us and humiliated us.
So it starts the
laid on us-
Passover story.
Right. And then we cried to the Lord, the God, and we started a Passover. So it's like, well, that's not Abraham's story. That's Jacob's story.
Yeah, that's the story of Jacob and his sons.
Goes down into Egypt, becomes, a great nation, is enslaved, and is brought out again.
Right.
And we said, why would he be called an Aramean? And we realized, because Jacob went to Padan Aram to find a wife.
Yep. And
He ended up with 4 wives, 2 of them native-born Arameans,
Mhm.
2 of them descendants of Nahor.
So they're Arameans, essentially.
Everybody in Jacob's family would have had an Aramean accent,
Mm-hmm.
would have dressed like the Arameans, would have worn the Aramean clothing. They were not Canaanites or raised in Abraham's and Isaac's household in Canaan. They were Arameans.
Well, that's why he was a wandering Aramean, because he may have lived in Canaan. That is the promised land.
That's his birthplace.
That's where he was born, but yet he grew up and spent most of his life, married life, in Padan Aram.
And that's where he raised most of his children. Only Benjamin was born in Canaan.
Right. So we think of the 12 tribes of Israel, and you think of them as being Israeli. Well, technically they're Aramean.
Well, at the time, that's what they were.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting that we've heard speculation before on why this passage would call Abraham the Aramean.
It was Jacob that was the Aramean.
The problem was it was Jacob.
And his 12 sons.
And it's easy to understand once you start thinking that through why he would be called that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that that's how God characterized him.
Now, when, what was it? Who was called a Hebrew? Was that Abraham?
Abraham was called Abraham the Hebrew.
So Abraham was
Eberite.
called an Eberite. Now, was Joseph ever called an Eberite?
He says, I was taken from my home among the Hebrews.
Among the Hebrews. So there's a memory that even though they're Aramean, they were Hebrews among the Arameans.
Well, that's what Joseph called himself.
Mm-hmm. So they're descendants of Eber.
But God called them
Mhm.
Arameans.
Well, no, God told the Israelites, when you recount
Right,
about
that's what
your
I mean.
father,
That's what you call yourself.
you call yourself an Aramean.
So it's not really a huge big deal, but it's one of those things that we read before and gone, what?
Right. Well, I think it might also be a from here to here story. You know, it
Yes.
started off from a wandering Aramean to sojourners in Egypt, but now we're in the land. Now we're our own people. We're the people of God. So it's more like where we came from to where we are now. It doesn't mean that you're supposed to call yourself an Aramean for the rest of your life.
I know. It was really fascinating to suddenly hear the words and realize they fit a different man than we had assumed.
Mm-hmm. So that was the big treasure from the Torah portion that we picked up this week.
This is, I think, why you have to keep reading things over and over and over again, because we've read that same passage over and over again every year. I've heard it countless times in the Bible tapes growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you hear this stuff over and over and over, and then one day you say, wait a second.
It clicks.
That's not what I thought it said. Why does it say the half tribe of Manasseh? Oh, it's because half of Manasseh settled across the Jordan and the other half settled with the rest of the... What do you mean only half of Manasseh settled across the Jordan? I didn't realize half of Manasseh went with all the other Israelites.
Well, it seems like every Torah portion we have one of these aha moments.
Well,
You
yes.
know? And that's what we like to talk about. And sometimes the aha moments are profound, and sometimes they're just like, oh, duh.
It was a riddle.
It was a riddle. Yeah, the
This was
girls...
not one of the more profound
No.
ones, really.
The children have been watching this mystery cartoon, and now they're all fascinated with mysteries and riddles and solving things.
It's based on the Richard Scarry books, and basically it's mysteries in Busy Town. They really like it.
One winter we had footprints we found it in the morning, footprints in our backyard.
Somebody took a shortcut through our yard, climbed the fence.
And thankfully nothing was stolen or anything, but they were cutting through our property, and that they have been absolutely fascinated with the idea of footprints in the snow. Who are they? Should we follow them?
It's hard for them to accept that after 3 years it's probably pretty difficult to find any clue as to who those footprints belong to.
Well, then I told them a story about how we had our car broken in and our gift cards were stolen.
So now they made the connection that whoever made the footprints must have been the one who stole the cars. Never mind that those happened like a year apart.
Yeah, they were totally separate in time, but they've now connected the two. Footprints in the snow to the car robbery. So they still want to solve that mystery now.
So we read Torah portion and we hear mysteries to solve. And our kids are like, that's not much of a mystery.
Someday
That's a boring mystery.
Well, even after we figure out all of our mysteries, they're going to read the Torah portions and they're going to solve their own mysteries too.
There will be more mysteries for them to solve.
And hopefully we'll be around to hear them.
I think we'll hear some at least.
Abigail will call us up, or we'll come in the door and say, "You'll never guess what I found in Deuteronomy." Like, what? Tell me. Wandering Aramean.
We'll say, oh, we solved that mystery a long time ago.
I know.
Anyway,
Watch the Ben and Lauren show, episode 42.
I think we're actually on 44.
Whatever episode we are. Anyway,
And it's 42 minutes long.
Yeah, I think at this point, if you've made it this far, congratulations. I don't know what would be the prize. Thumbs up.
Maybe
Two thumbs up.
The prize is we stop recording and say, okay, you're released now.
All right. Everybody, good night.
Good night.